Welcome to All Things Console. I'm JD, and this monster right here coming to us 5 days before Halloween in the year 2000, sliding in just a little over a year after the successful launch of the Sega Dreamcast, 6th generation of consoles, second one for Sony, the PlayStation 2. Boasting backward capability for both PlayStation 1 games and the highly successful DualShock controller, which to this day is still being used, probably one of the best layouts for a controller ever made, in my opinion, probably a lot of yours as well. This thing has survived, what is it now, 4 different consoles. It started with this on the PlayStation 1, I think it was 1997 when they developed the first DualShock controller. From then on out, it went from light gray to dark gray to black with the DualShock 2 controller. The DualShock 2 was a little bit lighter and the analog sticks were a little bit more firm, plus it added pressure sensitivity to all the buttons. The DualShock controller is a prime example. If it's not broke, don't fix it. It's lasted this long. People are still comfortable with it, still playing with it to this day, and I don't see any reason to change a controller up that much from console to console. Sony was very smart when it came to that, because, like I said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Selling over 155 million units, keeping in production until 2013, and not even discontinuing service on the console until 2018, makes this one of the most impressive and legendary consoles ever to have been created. Now, this specific console here I picked up locally. I only paid 50 bucks for it. It came in its original box, a beat-up box, which is a tradition with me, but box nonetheless. It came with that. It came with a DualShock 2 controller, which I was told was the original controller that it came with. It's barely got any wear on the analog sticks at all. Normally when you find these, there's a little wore out. The analog sticks are still tight. This thing was immaculate. There's like no dust inside of it whatsoever. It came from a smoke-free home. It still had all the instruction manuals with it. And it came with a stack of 11 games. All were complete in box. Every one of them was near flawless. There were like no scratches on it, not even from coming in and out of the console. I was very impressed and very lucky to find this all bundled together and for such a cheap price. And which brings me back that at the time, in 2000, when these first came out, I definitely didn't have the money to get them. In fact, I didn't get my first console, or my first PlayStation 2 console, until later on in 2001. Because at the time I was about 17 years old, I was living with a roommate, working a part-time minimum wage job, and was in an apprenticeship at a tattoo shop. So I had no money. I could barely eat. But luckily for me, I had a friend who had gotten one on Christmas, and he didn't really play it, he didn't really want it, so he decided to sell it to me on $20 a week payments, which made it very affordable. And that was a painfully long time to wait, because prior to that, my cousin Adrian had come over for Thanksgiving dinner in 2001. A month before that, Grand Theft Auto 3 had dropped. So he brought his PlayStation 2, which I had never played before, and a copy of Grand Theft Auto 3. And I played Grand Theft Auto 3 all that night, all night long, no sleep, and then all the way up until like 4 or 5 o'clock in the next afternoon. I was addicted, and I about had to be restrained when he left because I was trying to tackle him and take the stuff back. So I had to wait until later on, I think it was, correction, 2002, by the time I got my console. It would have been early 2002 before I got my PlayStation 2, and that was it. From then on out, I was addicted, and that addiction to Grand Theft Auto games would carry me through 2 more Grand Theft Auto titles and 2 more PlayStation 2 consoles, because I had worn one out and I ended up having to buy another one. And then of course I bought the Slim later on around the release of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. And as I mentioned, the PlayStation 2 launched about a year after the Sega Dreamcast. The Sega Dreamcast was pretty successful when it launched. It did 500,000 units within the first 2 weeks of its launch, and I believe it did 10.6 million for its entire run, which was very short. But it only took a year and a half, and the success of the PlayStation 2 helped drive the final nail into the coffin of the Sega Dreamcast. But that's not what this episode is about, and we're definitely going to do an episode on the Sega Dreamcast just as soon as I can find it. And to be able to find it, I'd have to be able to go out and look, and of course, as we all know, that's not really something we can do right now. But I'm about this close from just ordering it online and being done with it because I really want to play. And even though the PlayStation 2 wasn't the most powerful 6th generation console in the lineup, it didn't have the emphasis on online play like the Dreamcast did and the Xbox did with their built-in capability. It did, however, have some exclusives, and its 2001 year lineup of games was enough to help power it through the launch of both the Xbox and the GameCube. Those titles include Grand Theft Auto 3, Gran Turismo 3, A-Spec, Final Fantasy X, Devil May Cry, just to name a few. And games like that we're still playing today. Then in 2002, with the release of Xbox Live, PlayStation 2 would still put up a fight with the release of PlayStation Network and this awesome game, SOCOM US Navy SEALs, which is one of my personal favorite games. The only downside was that at the time, if you already had a PlayStation 2 console, you would have to go out and buy a PlayStation Network adapter. With that being said, there weren't a whole lot of drawbacks to the PlayStation 2. One of the best consoles ever to exist, one I still play. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same way. It is definitely a welcome addition to my collection. For those of you that don't know, I'm starting my entire collection again from the ground up, the whole basis of my channel, and since then I have actually gotten about 4 or 5 more consoles that I haven't been able to show anyone yet, and probably 60 more games. Those are ones that I've been collecting since January and February of 2020, but with everything going on in the world right now, videos are a little slow to be made and go out for me. But I just want you to know that I'm still collecting as much as I can, even though a lot of it is online. You know, I'm not going anywhere, I'm staying in the house, staying safe. But there will be more videos to come, and I really appreciate you stopping by the channel, checking out my new stuff, looking at what's new in the collection. Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you next time.